So a computer comes into our repair shop completely dead. The customer presses the power button, nothing. No fans, no lights, no beep codes, nothing. Their conclusion? The motherboard is dead. And honestly, that's a reasonable guess, except for the fact that the motherboard wasn't dead. What actually caused this computer to look completely lifeless was something considerably cheaper, and it's a perfect reminder of why we diagnose before we just start throwing parts at a computer. And we'll get into that repair later today. Plus, Microsoft just dropped another enormous batch of Windows security fixes. We've got an interesting router security issue to talk about. Plus, I'm featuring one of my favorite cleaning tools. And lastly, we'll talk about one mistake that can cost a computer repair shop a lot of money. Welcome to Season 3 of the Computer Repair Academy podcast. So let's get it.
You're listening to the Computer Repair Academy podcast, a show that's your go-to podcast for easy tech fixes, pro tricks, computer repair tips, and everything you need to keep your computer running smoothly. So if you're ready to upgrade your tech game, then let's dive in.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Season 3 of the Computer Repair Academy podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy, and I'm really excited about this season because we're changing things up a little bit. We're still going to teach about computer repair. We're still going to troubleshoot problems, but we're also going to talk about what's happening in technology right now, what's actually coming across our repair benches. We'll talk about some cool products and tools that we're using, and something I really want to spend more time talking about, which is the business of computer repair. So whether you're fixing your own computers, learning to become a technician, you're already working in IT, or if you're running your own computer repair business, there should be something here for you every episode. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by NordPass. If you're still reusing passwords, writing them on sticky notes, or constantly hitting that forgot password button, it might be time for a better solution. Now, NordPass helps you securely store and manage your passwords, generate strong and unique passwords, and automatically fill in your login information when you need it. Features like Password Help can help you identify weak and reused passwords, while the Data Breach Scanner can alert you if your information shows up on a known breach. So whether you're managing your own accounts or helping protect a business, NordPass makes password management a whole lot easier. Now, I've personally used this for years and I love it. So if you want to learn more about NordPass, we'll have a link in the show notes for you. And of course, a big thanks to NordPass for supporting today's episode. All right, your passwords are secure, hopefully your coffee is still warm, and it's time to find out what's happening in the world of tech. So from a massive month of Windows security patches, to an update giving some PC gamers headaches, and a router vulnerability that definitely caught my attention, there's plenty to talk about. So let's jump into this week's Tech News Report. First up, Microsoft had an unusually busy Patch Tuesday earlier this month. The August 26 security updates addressed about 400 vulnerabilities across Windows and other Microsoft products. And more importantly, one of those vulnerabilities was already being actively exploited before Microsoft released the fix. There were also dozens of vulnerabilities rated critical, including flaws that could potentially allow attackers to remotely execute code on your machine. So yeah, when Microsoft says it needs to install some security updates this month, there's actually quite a bit happening behind that little spinning update screen. Now, for the average home user, this is just another reminder that Windows Updates isn't just Microsoft changing icons or adding features nobody asked for. A lot of these updates are actually closing security holes. And for repair technicians and IT professionals, patching becomes even more important. So if you're preparing a refurbished computer for a customer or maintaining machines for a business, sending out an unpatched Windows system isn't something you want to do. Now, my take on this is pretty simple. Keep your computers updated, but be smart about it. For critical security updates, I don't recommend simply turning Windows Update off and just forgetting about it. You definitely want to leave that on. But at the same time, especially in a business environment, there's nothing wrong with giving a new update a little time for problems to surface before you deploy it everywhere. Or you can actually deploy it in like a test environment or even a home lab if you have one set up. And that actually brings us perfectly to our second tech news story. Because while security updates are important, occasionally an update fixes one problem and introduces another. Microsoft is recently investigating reports of certain PC games crashing or becoming unresponsive after the August 11th Windows 11 update. Now, reported symptoms include games freezing, suddenly closing, showing exception violation errors, and in some cases even causing the computer to restart. Microsoft says its investigation has found a connection with certain peripherals or internal components that use RGB lighting, along with software or other drivers installed that control that hardware. So like 90% of the gaming machines out there, right? Now, some of the games mentioned in the report include Arc Raiders, Marvel Fighting Souls, and the Finals. But here's where it gets interesting from a repair perspective. Imagine someone brings you a gaming PC and says, "Hey, my games keep crashing. I think my graphics card is dying." I mean, you could spend a lot of time testing that GPU and drivers and things of that nature. But if everything worked perfectly until Tuesday night when Windows installed an update, that's a pretty important clue, right? And that's my biggest takeaway from the story. Always ask what changed. Did Windows update? Did the graphics driver change? Did you install new RGB software? Did you connect new hardware? So good troubleshooting isn't about immediately replacing whatever component looks suspicious. It's about building a timeline, following the evidence, and figuring out what changed right before the problem started. Sometimes the expensive graphic card isn't broken at all. Sometimes Windows just had a bad Tuesday. And finally, we've got a networking story that caught my attention as well. Security researchers disclosed a vulnerability affecting a specific Calyx residential router, a router used by several broadband providers like Frontier, Brightspeed, and Ziply Fiber. The vulnerability can potentially allow a remote attacker, without authenticating first, to create like port forwarding rules within the router. If the phrase port forwarding just made your eyes glaze over, here's a simple version of that. So your router normally provides a security layer between the devices inside your home and the public internet outside of your home. So port forwarding deliberately opens a path from the outside world to a particular device or service inside of your network. So the scary part here is that an attacker could potentially create those rules or those paths when you never ask them to, or you may not even know that they're there. So of course that could expose devices sitting behind that router that you assumed weren't directly accessible from the internet. And it's also a great reminder that your router isn't just a plastic box with blinking lights. It's basically a computer. It has an operating system, it runs software, it has vulnerabilities, and it needs updates just like the PC sitting on your desk. So here's my take on this. Check your router every once in a while, like monthly. Like log into your router, check the firmware versions, go to the manufacturer's website, see if there's any versions available. Just make sure that the firmware is current. Change any default administrative passwords on the router. Disable any remote administration if you don't need it. And if you're using an ancient router that hasn't received a firmware update in years, it may be time to replace that router. Or you could even go to your ISP and see if they'll just swap it for you if you have an ISP router. We spend a lot of time securing our computers while completely ignoring the device that connects every one of these computers to the internet. So again, don't forget about the router or other network devices. And that's your tech news report for the week. 3 very different stories, but there's actually one common theme connecting all of them, and that's that updates matter. Windows updates, application updates, and even the firmware running on that little box sitting beside your modem. But enough about what's going on in the world of tech. Let's bring things a little bit closer to home because we've had some interesting computers come through the shop here recently. So grab your screwdriver and your troubleshooting hat. It's time to head over to the repair bench. All right, first up on the repair bench this week is a desktop computer that came with a pretty straightforward complaint. It won't turn on. And when I say it wouldn't turn on, I mean absolutely nothing. Press the power, no lights, no fans, beeps, nothing on the screen, completely dead, right? The customer was pretty convinced that the motherboard had failed. And honestly, when a computer shows no signs of life like that, the motherboard, the CPU, or even the power supply certainly belongs in the suspect list. But we don't replace parts just based on guesses. So we started with the basics. We checked the power cables, made sure the power supply switch was on, checked the internal power connections. We even tested the power supply. Everything looked good. The power supply could turn the computer on. The motherboard could actually even turn the computer on. That's when the problem started pointing itself to something much simpler. The power case button itself. We tested the front power switch connection and discovered the switch had failed underneath the power button itself. The fix was easily replacing the faulty power switch that I just bought on Amazon. And once we bypassed the bad switch and confirmed everything else is working, the computer powered right up. No motherboard replacement, no power supply replacement, just a failed power button making an otherwise functional PC look completely dead. And here's this week's first bench lesson. Never let the customer's diagnosis become your diagnosis. The motherboard is dead isn't the symptom. The computer does nothing when I press the power button is the symptom. So start there, test logically, and let the evidence tell you what's actually broken. All right, the second computer we're looking at came in with a more concerning complaint. I think somebody hacked me, is what the customer told me. The customer was getting security warnings, virus alerts, subscription messages, pop-ups telling the computer was infected, all that fun stuff. And they just kept coming, right? You click one away and another appears. You open the browser, another warning. So from the customer's perspective, it certainly looked like the computer had been completely infected. So instead of immediately assuming malware, we started looking at where the messages were actually coming from. We checked the installed programs, we checked the startup applications, we checked the web browser extensions, and then we looked at the browser's notification permissions, and there it was. At some point, the customer had visited a few questionable websites and clicked allow when the websites asked for permission to send notifications or alerts. Now, those sites could push fake virus warnings and fake security alerts directly through the browser and actually not even have to open the browser for those alerts to kind of pop up on the computer desktop screen. So we went in and removed the unwanted notification permissions. Actually, we just reset those permissions. And then, of course, we went and checked for suspicious browser extensions again. Cleaned up the web browser, and then we ran a malware scan with Malwarebytes just to make sure there wasn't anything else kind of hiding on the machine. Once those notification permissions were removed, the endless stream of those scary alerts and pop-ups, they pretty much disappeared. All right, the bench lesson here is a scary pop-up doesn't automatically mean the machine is infected with malware. So you're going to go figure out where the message is actually coming from, but don't dismiss it either. Verify the browser, check the installed software, scan the machine, check the startup entries. Make sure you're solving the actual problem instead of simply making the pop-ups just disappear. All right, so my repair bench tip of the week is start with the symptom, not the solution, right? So if a customer comes in and says, hey, my hard drive's died, my computer has a virus, or Windows needs reinstalling, that's a diagnosis. What you actually need to start with is the question, what's your computer doing? So again, start with the symptom, not the solution. And that's going to do it for this week's On the Repair Bench. Now, speaking about a repair bench, every repair bench needs a few good tools. And occasionally we find one that earns a permanent spot in the toolkit on the bench. So let's switch gears real quick and take a look at this week's product feature. This week's product feature was sent to us by Sabrent, and it's the Sabrent Blowzer X6, a rechargeable cordless electric air duster designed to replace those cans of compressed air we've all gone through over the years. It's compact, charges with USB-C, has 3 different power settings, and its brushless motor can spin up to 130,000 RPM. So yeah, it's pretty powerful. It includes multiple nozzles and brushes, so you can use it from everything to like keyboards, to workbenches, to blowing out the dust of like a desktop PC. Now, if you regularly work on computers, this is really where something like the Blowzer makes sense. So instead of constantly buying cans of compressed air and dealing with those cans getting cold and losing pressure, you can charge this thing up, grab it off the bench, and just use it again and again. So for the repair shop like us, where you may be cleaning several computers a week, that convenience adds up pretty quickly. And what I really like about this device is the power and the portability. For such a small device, it moves a serious amount of air. I also like having the 3 different power settings because I don't necessarily need full blast for every job, especially like on a keyboard, things of that nature. It feels much like an actual shop tool than just a disposable cleaning product. So again, the USB-C charging makes it super easy to keep on the bench and just super handy. Now this thing costs roughly $70. So there's definitely a more upfront cost than buying just a pack of compressed air. And secondly, this thing is not quiet, especially at the higher settings. You're going to hear it, but neither one of those is a deal breaker for me, and it's absolutely worth knowing before you buy. So if you're constantly building PCs, or you run a repair shop, or you're regularly cleaning electronics, I think this Sabrent Blowzer X6 makes a lot of sense as a reusable bench tool. And if you want to actually see it in action, we made a video of the Blowzer X6 over on our Computer Repair Academy YouTube channel. So go check that out after the podcast. And that's going to wrap up this week's product feature. Now, having the right tools can make you a better technician, but knowing how to actually run the business behind the repair bench is just as important. So let's put those tools down for a minute, head into the office, and talk business. It's time for the office desk. For our first trip to the office desk, I want to talk about something I see a lot of newer technicians and newer small repair businesses that they struggle with, and that's giving away their diagnostics for free. So imagine a customer walks in and says, "Hey, can you take a quick look and tell me what's wrong with it?" Sounds harmless, right? But that quick look can turn into checking the power supply and then testing the RAM and then running that drive diagnostics and then troubleshooting Windows and checking temperatures and researching error codes. And suddenly you've spent 45 minutes or an hour figuring out exactly what's going on. Then the customer says, "Okay, well, thanks, appreciate it. I'll think about the repair," and walks out the door. Well, you just gave away arguably the most valuable part of the repair process, your knowledge and your diagnosis. So a diagnostic fee isn't charging someone just to look at their computer. They're paying for your time, your tools, your experience, and most importantly, your ability to determine what's actually wrong and what it will take to fix it. Every shop handles this differently. So you might charge a flat diagnostic fee, and you might apply that fee towards the repair if the customer approves the work. So we actually offer a basic diagnostic and an advanced diagnostic. Our advanced diagnostic is if we have to disassemble a laptop, for example, which involves a lot more time and a lot more risk, right? But we definitely want to charge for a diagnostic fee. So whichever system you choose, the most important thing is to have a clear policy and communicate this to the customer up front. So here's your action item for the week. Write down your diagnostic policy. What do you charge? When is the fee collected? How does it apply towards the repair? And what exactly does the customer receive for that fee? Do they get a report? Do they get something tangible that lets them know what's going on? Now, if you run a repair business or if you think about starting one, please do not undervalue this part of the job because it requires the most important tool on your bench, which is your experience. All right, so before we wrap up today's show, I want to leave you with this week's community question. What's the strangest computer problem you've ever encountered? Maybe it was a repair that made absolutely no sense at first, a customer problem that turned out to have a ridiculously simple fix, or one of those machines that seemed determined to fight you every step of the way. I think we've all kind of had those. So if you've got a good story, share it with us. And you never know, we may feature your story in a future episode of the podcast. All right, we covered a lot in our first episode back for season 3. In the Tech News Report, we talked about Microsoft's latest security update issues. We talked about the Windows gaming PC crashes and why you shouldn't forget about keeping your router secure. Then on the repair bench, we had a completely dead desktop with a surprisingly simple fix and a computer that looked hacked, but it was really just dealing with some malicious browser notifications. We checked out the Sabrent Blowzer X6 and our product feature, and then from the office desk, we talked about why repair technicians should never undervalue their diagnostic time. Not a bad way to kick off season 3, but most importantly, thank you for listening. And that's going to do it for today's episode of the Computer Repair Academy podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please make sure you follow or subscribe wherever you listen so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you want even more computer repair content, please consider heading over to our Computer Repair Academy YouTube channel, where we cover computer tips and tricks, repair tutorials, software reviews, how-to videos, and plenty more. Thanks again to NordPass for supporting the show. And of course, thank y'all so much for listening. I'm your host, Jeremy. And until next time, keep learning, keep troubleshooting, and I'll see you back at the repair bench.
Thanks again for tuning in to the Computer Repair Academy podcast. Until next time, keep those PCs running smoothly.